Welcome to the Vertical Flight Workforce Panel. I'm Danielle McLean, and I'm not going to go through my intro because I'm going to assume that you were here for the last panel, and it's still me, so you know who I am. I'll introduce our panelists, and then I'll ask some questions. It's going to be structured exactly like the last panel, so if you have any questions during it, raise your hand. We'll bring you a mic. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists. So first we've got Dr. Maryam Khoshlahjeh. She's Senior Manager of Propellers at Archer Aviation. Maryam has worked at Joby Aviation for 4 years prior to joining Archer Aviation. Prior to Joby and Archer, she worked at Sikorsky Aircraft as Rotor Dynamics lead for Combat Rescue Helicopter and Deputy Program Manager for Turkish Utility Helicopter Program. Dr. Khoshlahjeh started her vertical flight career 20 years ago at Advanced Rotorcraft Technology, where she contributed to the development and advancement of Rotorcraft comprehensive analysis systems. Dr. Khoshlahjeh has a master's in aeronautics and astronautics from Stanford University and a PhD on rotorcraft aeromechanics from Penn State University. Please welcome Maryam. Welcome. Next, we have Matthew Land. Matthew Land leads government relations and public policy for Eve Air Mobility, focused on issues at the federal, state, and local level throughout the United States. Eve is an independent company that recently spun off from Embraer and is dedicated to accelerating the urban air mobility ecosystem through an advanced electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle project, a comprehensive globe services and support network, and a unique air traffic management solution. Matthew has worked in various capacities in politics for more than a dozen years, including campaigns as a volunteer, campaign manager, and finance director, and as a lobbyist before Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, the cities of Miami, Miami Beach, Tampa, and St. Petersburg, and the state of Florida. Please welcome Matthew. Next, we have Mike Hirschberg, who you all are wondering who he is, I'm certain. Mike Hirschberg assumed the duties of the Vertical Flight Society Executive Director in June 2011 after 20 years in the aerospace industry, primarily in vertical flight. As the VFS Executive Director, he represents the vertical flight technical community and advocates for the advancement of vertical flight research and technology. Mr. Hirschberg is the publisher of all society publications, including Vertiflight. That's enough. That's enough? Oh, thanks, that was long. All right, please welcome Mike. You've all read his bio many times on the website. Next, we have Sharon Rossmark. Sharon Rossmark is the Chief Executive Officer of Women in Drones, a global network of women in the emerging aviation industry. The organization spans across 22 countries on 6 continents. Sharon is a change leader with diverse industry and functional experience in Fortune 100 privately held and startup companies. She is a collaborative business executive who cultivates opportunities with global and domestic organizations. She has a proven career record in leading and building operational performance during dynamic growth, turnaround, acquisition, and changing environments for mature and growing businesses. Her range of experience includes key roles in board governance, insurance, and financial services. She has held leadership roles as board chair, vice chair, audit committee chair, and governance chair. In addition, her board experience includes serving on aviation, healthcare, and education boards. And then here's my favorite part. Sharon is the author of 3 children's books featuring girls flying drones, an international speaker, and a frequently requested panel moderator. She holds an FAA Part 107 remote pilot certificate. Please welcome Sharon. All right, so we'll jump in, and this is in no particular order. Anybody can answer these questions, and if the audience wants to ask some questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic. So the Vertical Flight Society conducted a workforce study that HYSKY Society did collaboratively, and what we found, the key takeaway was we need 10,000 engineers in a decade to support the vertical flight industry. And we also need $1 billion to support them. So what we found is that significant additional funding is really needed for academia to train enough highly skilled engineers to meet the industry demands. And this report emphasizes that attracting and retaining, keyword, and we're going to talk about that more later, new engineers is essential, and that an employee's perceived value, also key, perceived value, is more important than their salary. The report recommends that companies be transparent about demographics and attrition rates and suggests conducting an industry-wide study on workplace ostracism that includes intersectionality. And we'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So I'll start by asking this, also a three-part question, and anybody can answer in no particular order. So how might a shortage of vertical flight engineers affect our industry and the Department of Defense? Can other countries capitalize off of the United States vertical flight engineering shortage? Is this a global problem or specific to the United States?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
All right, so audio on, you can hear me okay? So we really see workforce as one of the most critical issues of all to reach the vertical flight goals that we have envisioned. So none of this exciting, green, sustainable economic benefits of AAM or eVTOL can happen without people like you. Without the talent like we have in this room and around the world, we will not get there. And at the same time that billions of dollars are being funded that are going invested into eVTOL companies, the U.S. Department of Defense is also investing billions of dollars in its new Rotorcraft programs. And there's a lot of capability overlap. It's not just cranking out engineers, you need the years of experience. So we really see that unless academia has the support to train and graduate engineers, especially with advanced degrees, and industry has that ability to attract and retain them, that we will not reach our objectives. And it is a global problem, a global shortage. Many of the eVTOL companies you heard about today are in Europe and Asia. So there is a global crisis in a vertical flight workforce.
Interesting. And yeah, we see a lot of people kind of moving from company to company, and ideally we would have enough engineers to supply everybody. What strategies can the vertical flight industry implement to address the shortage of highly skilled engineers in the coming years? Go for it.
Right. So first of all, I want to thank you for that study. If you guys have not read it, I highly recommend to read that report. It's very informative, brilliant work. So at Archer, we're really focusing on attracting early career talented individuals with interest in aviation, obviously. And then what we do, we try to upskill and help them develop and train them for the opportunities that we need to fill the gaps for. It's a struggle, of course. There's, as you said, so there was initially the Rotorcraft OEMs, and then now we have all these eVTOL companies. So there's a challenge there with people moving from one to the other. But then this pipeline really starts at academia. So we really need for government to start funneling money into research for that. Previously, I can speak for VLRCO, the Vertical Lift Research Center of Excellence, that the graduates from VLRCOs would go to Bell, Boeing, Sikorsky, and now they have all these other options. And unless that pipeline starts meeting the demand, we're all going to be fighting over talent.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned VLRCO. Marilyn Smith was supposed to be on this panel, and she ended up having to do federal jury duty, but she would, I think, certainly agree
Absolutely.
with what you just said, and
Absolutely.
appreciate you saying that.
And then to name and put them on spot, the NSF, the Department of Energy, DOD, they have been traditionally sustaining and putting, funding into these centers of excellence, and they just have to keep doing what they've been doing, which is amazing. But then they have to understand they have to scale it now to meet the demand.
Sure, yeah, more people.
So, I mean, I would just offer, for those of you who were here yesterday and stuck around till the very end and got to hear from the Vertical Flight Society Arizona chapter, just listening to some of the work that they are doing, right? Talking to students and from the middle school, high school, providing scholarships for these students that are getting their bachelor's and master's in engineering. It's fantastic. Some of the work that Eve is doing, we have to figure out how to get to students sooner and sooner and sooner. We did a simulation in Chicago last fall, a commuter use case, but through that process, we brought in students from high schools and some of the city colleges to learn more about aviation, right? We need to get them to get that aviation bug within inside of them early and often. We're doing work with, speaking at University of Miami, their College of Engineering, their autonomous mobility program, and talking to those engineering students and saying, here is a pathway for you, right? You may not have thought about this, but let's get you excited about it now. I think just doing some of those types of things are great ways to inspire that kind of next generation of aviators, but also the engineering world, that these are some skills that you can be honing in on now that can be very, very, very lucrative for you in the future.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So there was a NASA grant that I know that at least Florida International University was awarded. I don't know if there were other universities, but they reached out to us as part of that award to help them with this process and to exactly what you just recalled, those same processes, but even more. They actually asked us to help them with providing panels of individuals that could come to the university to have them sit down with students, professionals that look like them, and hear them talk about what they can expect, what's involved, why they should consider a career in engineering and STEM in aviation, because it's so important. And we have a saying that if you see me, you can be me. They need to understand that there's opportunities for them that will include them and that they can be very successful at it. And that was a NASA awarded grant. When there's a NASA awarded grant to Florida International University. And it's going to be ongoing because it's not once and done. It has to be something that's sustainable, that you can continually get in front of the students with different individuals. You can't keep using the same individuals because not only do you burn them out, but then the students start to think that, oh, there's only a couple of people that look like me that are involved in this. So it is a holistic process, but one that has to be repeatable and as well as engage a variety of individuals.
So we can have these chapters, we have chapters around the world, and they can work on a few schools, a few elementary and high school and universities. We can have these outreach things, and we really do need to find people in elementary school and middle school and break down the barriers that, if you have the vision of what a doctor looks like, it's not an old white guy, right? So it's, we need to have people envision themselves as being either an engineer or a pilot or a maintenance officer or whatever. So we need to get kids, we need to get people excited about aviation, show them that there's a place for them, and that, once they get into there, they can, once they're excited about aviation, they can decide, oh, I want to be a pilot, or I want to be a drone operator, or I want to be an engineer or whatever. And that's really the key, is getting people excited at an early age. And like I said, it's like boiling the ocean. We won't be able to boil the whole ocean, but we can boil little parts of it, and then hopefully that'll add up to 10,000 engineers and more.
Yeah, hopefully. And that's why I love that Sharon wrote children's books. Talk about getting people even before academia. That's brilliant. We need to have more of those. We need to have more of that happening. I think that's really great. So with respect to demographics and attrition rates, and this is something that we talked about in detail in the study, and I'll just tell you, for those of you that haven't read it, it's not good. It's not good. It's embarrassing. It's quite embarrassing and much worse than the national average in aviation, the attrition rates. People voluntarily leaving companies and industry. It's double, or if not more, than the national average. And in the eVTOL space, it's even worse than that. So with that said, and I encourage you to read it, how do we stay focused on data and refrain from politics where, we get into a situation that people feel attacked, or in trouble or ashamed, and then we can't even have the conversation anymore where, we just want to talk about the data and like, how can we make these numbers better? How do we address that? That's what I've found has been the biggest challenge, is just talking about the data and how to fix the problem.
So I can comment on that. So first of all, another good thing that I loved about the report is that it's not just talking about the problem, it's trying to come up with offering solution as well. So definitely, besides what you have put in that report, I would like to say that from my perspective, 20 years in the aviation industry, is that there was a time I had the ladies' room all to myself. But now walking around Archer, I see a lot of women, very competent, many different colors, lots of accents in every this conversation, So we have come a long way. So we have definitely been doing certain things right, which is great as an industry. But then knowing where we want to go, we can't keep up what we've been doing. We have to increase the effort to be able to keep, growing to where we want to be. And another thing is that the industry is so solution-oriented that not sharing the data is not going to serve us well at the end. So as an industry, if we really want to be addressing a problem, we really have to be, being willing to share focusing on the problem, focusing on the solution by sharing the information and what the actual problem is.
Yeah, I think that data certainly is such an invaluable tool, whether it's industry-wide data or whether it's data that each companies are collecting on themselves. Being invited to this panel, Mike, thank you so much for asking me to be part of this panel. I do government relations, but I have to learn so much about what we are doing as a company and how we're trying to promote a very diverse and inclusive workforce. And talking with our employee journey team, they were telling me things like, we have a very low attrition rate. And as I compared that to the numbers in the report, I was, asking them, why do you think that is? What are we doing to find out about why we have a low attrition rate? Mm-hmm. And, they said we are doing, deep, extensive interviews with our employees when they're leaving us. And, we hate to lose them, but trying to find out why they're leaving, right? In the report, it highlights workplace ostracism is one of the primary reasons why people are leaving their jobs, especially in the aerospace and defense industry. For Eve, I think that what we are finding from our employees is that they want to go abroad. They want to go somewhere else. They perhaps maybe their partner or spouse received a new work opportunity, and it's such that they are going with them, or whatever else that reason might be. It's exciting to know that our leadership team at Eve is 50% women, right? 30% of our workforce is women. So we certainly, I think there's always room for more improvement across all of those different spectrums. But learning more about kind of the demographics, because I tried to dig into that with our employee journey team and said, what do we know about all of our employees? And so we know some things like 28% of our employees are non-aviation employees. I am one of the 20%. I do not have a background in aviation. But trying to dig in deeper into those demographics, they're planning to do like an upcoming employee-wide census that's done anonymously. So we can try to better understand that data for our own company so we can find ways to further promote hiring a more inclusive and diverse workforce.
That's great. What he just explained, it's about leadership. The answer to boiling the ocean, it's about leadership. It's a leadership issue. Leadership has to care. Leadership has to make it a priority. Leadership has to talk about it. Leadership has to make a plan for it. And that leadership goes all the way to the top. And if that top is your board of directors, you have to ask, is my board of directors diverse? Do they understand the issue? Do they understand the attrition rates? But if it doesn't start at the top, then it becomes someone's assignment along the path that someone has to be accountable for, but it's that person rather than at the top. But what you just explained, it's about caring and it's about leadership. It really, clearly, it's as simple as that. Simple but hard, because it's not one of those things that you can clearly tie something to until you start digging into the hard numbers along the way, such as attrition. And you'd be surprised at how many companies don't understand what are their costs to attrition. They may know what the numbers are, but they may not understand what is the cost associated with attrition. The other thing I would add to that is don't be afraid to do something different because what you've been doing isn't working. and it's not moving the dial. It's not allowing us to turn down the temperature and boiling the ocean. So you have to try something different. And as leaders, we can't be afraid to try. I mean, you try something different every day in aviation, so why not try something different here? And it starts with who owns it, which is at the top, and what is going to be our process to let the employees know that we care, because employees spread the word for you. They become your spokespeople for bringing in others. And if they're happy and they're pleased with the organization, the word will get out, and your organization will become known as one that this is the company to come work for in the industry.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. So there was a study that McKinsey did a few years ago that Danielle made me aware of, and I hope I get this right, but it says if your board or your employee, if your workforce has at least 30% women, then you'll be more financially solvent. Fix my numbers.
Yeah, I think it's 30% women in leadership makes you 40% more profitable.
Right.
Just in leadership, I'm not even talking about company-wide. And I might have those numbers backwards. It might be 40% makes you 30% more,
No,
but
I think it's
something
30%,
like that.
yeah. So the point is, if everybody looks the same, they have the same background, then they probably have the same kind of thought processes. So diversity is not just, hey, we need to increase numbers because we need more people, and the traditional schools and a traditional pipeline for workforce isn't big enough. We need to go beyond that also for creative problem solving. So people that come from different backgrounds have different ways of thinking. And in aviation, it's a whole team effort, right? You can't just have everybody be a structural engineer and have a good system. So you need that diversity of thought and perspective and thought processes to be efficient. And again, helping to solve the workforce shortage for aviation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yesterday I saw on Twitter, somebody said, we need more women in aviation. And they said, this conference proves it. And then somebody else said, well, why? They're kind of smart and negative. Like, why do we need more women just for the sake of having more women? Well, I'll give you an example. And this is what I said to them. I was at an air show a couple of years ago, shopping for an aircraft. Never mind if I was really going to buy one or not, but I was just shopping. And there was one that I really liked, and there was a line. Everybody wanted to see it. So I got in, and I couldn't reach anything. So how do you scoot the seat up? And they're like, oh, it doesn't scoot up. I'm like, oh, you all assumed that all of your customers would be at least 6 feet tall. Well, you just lost 50% of your customers. So that's an example of why you need diversity of thought in engineering. And that plays out with everything, with AI, and in every single detail of life. So the more ideas, the more communities, the more different ideas that you have coming together, the better your product's going to be, the better you're going to serve people. And so that's just one example. I would love to get our panelists' ideas on that. Why do we need diversity?
Why not?
Yeah, I love it.
Why not? So it's not just diversity for, fusion of ideas and, the backgrounds. When I've been asked, because I've been at Joby, I've been at Archer and Sikorsky. So when I'm asked about, the differences between them, I say that that's something to celebrate. Just like we have diversity within the workforce, it's really healthy to have diversity with within the OEMs. Who has suffered from diversity? I don't know how to argue this one, honestly. It has, so far the data shows, the studies show it has only served. So why not?
I love it. And in fact, just even to add to that, this panel feels very organic and natural. I'm not even looking at my notes anymore. I had a bunch of questions. And we're proof. So anyway, yeah, thank you for that. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think it can't just be about diversity for diversity's sake. Mm-hmm. It has to be so there's also an inclusive work environment too. Mm-hmm. I'm openly LGBT. I have a husband, and I don't hide that. And when I was interviewing for my role at Eve and got very far along in the process, I said to my boss, who's leads our business development team, Eve is a spinoff of Embraer. Embraer is a Brazilian company. I know how they, their human rights issues are not so great. And am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be included in this team that you're building? And he was like, no problem whatsoever. But then you have to actually have that lived experience. I have felt nothing but welcome and open by all of my colleagues and team, but then just generally the employees, right? But I think that's the proof is in the pudding. You have to have that inclusive work environment and have to have, all of that in order for it to all work. It can't just be diversity hire for diversity hire's sake. It has to be such that those employees, whether they're women or minorities, underrepresented people, whatever that looks like, right, to make sure that they are included and that their ideas are being listened to, that they are heard. Listen, I'm very good at my job. It doesn't matter that I'm gay, right? But I think it's important to just make sure we're fostering that environment so that all of those workers are included.
Yeah. So I'd like to just go back to this very quickly, is that, yes, because there's a demand on increasing diversity, and just doing that to check the box and meet the numbers is not going to work, because then you increase diversity and then you also increase your attrition rate. So you really, if you're doing it, you really have to know what you're doing and why you're doing this. It's not just to check that box, really. It's really to see what it brings to your company or your industry, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Because if people aren't supported, then you could potentially create a very, very negative experience for them. And so, yeah, there's got to be that support there.
And I'll just say, DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is what you start with. You look beyond just people that look like you for your hiring practices. Inclusion is if people feel like they're part of the team, that they're not just, oh, there's our token, female or a twofer or whatever. This is a part of the team. So the inclusivity is what's going to reduce your attrition rates. And then equity is interesting. I guess I was a little bit late convert to this. I was taught very much equality. Everybody was equal, and you should just be colorblind and just treat everybody the same. And that's not quite right, because the institutional biases that we're all programmed with, of hundreds of years of discrimination, and that's gotten a lot better in the last several decades, but still has a long way to go, where everyone is valued for their own self. So there are barriers and roadblocks in front of so many of us, and so the equity part is also very important. So it's the whole diversity, inclusion, and equity.
My first comment would be ditto to what everyone has said on this, but I will add one additional piece. If you're at a company that maybe has opportunities around either the D, the E, or the I, and I always say, you know what? If you feel beat up over the D, set the D aside and focus on E and I internally and see what that does for your organization.
Beautiful.
But the question I would ask is, okay, I don't know how many people have daughters or sisters, but everyone has a mother. Would you want your mother to work at your company today? That's the question you should be asking when you're making policy decisions and making decisions around leadership and HR as it relates to any of this. Is this a place, an opportunity for your mother? And if you have a daughter, would you want your daughter working in this company? It's as simple as that. If you just ask yourself that personally, or ask your leadership team, are we a good place for our mothers to come to work? Are we a good place for our daughters to come to work? Are we a good place for our neighbor's kid to come to work? Those are the kind of questions that at least has you start thinking about, what do I need to change? Because you may be going, where do I even start? This is such a big issue. Start with that basic question and then own it. So that's what I would suggest is the first part, first step.
That was big. I got chills as soon as you said mother and daughter, and the answer to that has traditionally been no. And that's unfortunate, but, we're working to change that. Does anybody in the audience want to ask a question?
So I've got a question about developing the workforce of tomorrow. Vocational programs take about 5 years for state-funded schools to establish. And they're expensive, and the states don't have all the revenue they need to establish, especially a new program. They typically partner with industry. So my question is for the industry reps that are on the panel, especially the two reps from the major companies, what are you doing today to facilitate and bring about these vocational programs for technicians, for mechanics, and pilots at vocational centers, especially those in underserved communities?
So I can start. Thank you for the question. Real problem, and I'm happy to say that at Archer we are taking steps into addressing that. There's been dedicated recruiting events to underserved and diverse candidate targeted recruiting events. We have been at Society of Women Engineering trying to recruit there. But then the problem of today is that whatever is there is there. So we also, I'm very glad to see how at Archer we are trying to upskill and train and provide development opportunities so that our engineers today can grow with the industry. And then to address the other side of the pipeline, I think we have a very exciting industry. How many industries can put the presentations, all the pictures you've seen today, all the videos you've seen today, how many industries can come and compete with this? So we have to spark an interest, and we are active, with LinkedIn, or we are social media, we are actively trying to be showcasing the challenging and very interesting problems we're working on, so that would attract the engineers and hook them, give them the bug early on, so that we can bring them in, recruit them, and then work on, developing the certain skill sets that we need today, and then, the rest of it with academia trying to fill in the gap behind us. But we are trying to address the problem as of today as such.
Specifically on the VOTEC side, which is what you're bringing up, I think it's, for EVE at least, we are expected to certify aircraft in 2025 and be in commercial operations in 2026. So we certainly need to start building that talent pipeline now so that we have those eVTOL operators that are trained and ready to go, that we have the mechanics that are trained and ready to go. One of EVE's business models, or I guess business pillars, I should say rather, is on that maintenance and operator certification and training and things like that. That's a core business pillar of Embraer, our parent company. And so certainly we're kind of trying to take some of the lessons learned from Embraer and apply those to this sector as well. It's going to be a challenge regardless. The FAA has about $10 million worth of grants that are available every single year. $5 million towards pilot training and $5 million towards maintenance training. And so being able to tap into those resources, letting some of these, high schools, VOTEC schools know about this, by being able to kind of tap into some of those resources, I think is really helpful. I think, in talking to our employee journey team, some of the things that they are doing specifically to tap into the underrepresented communities. We're, trying to post our job offerings on cross-cutting various different channels. And some of those, places where you might not necessarily see those aviation-specific jobs being posted. Perhaps maybe it is an LGBTQ job board. Perhaps it is a one for minorities, women, or something like that, right? Just trying to get it out there and spread the word that these jobs do exist. We are trying to use very gender-neutral language in our job postings, which I think is somewhat helpful in trying to make sure that everybody understands that these roles at EVE and these future roles at EVE are open to everybody. We're doing what we can. It's certainly trying to build that talent pipeline, but I think that we're always open to new and creative, innovative solutions.
If I could just add, thank you for asking that question. Also, we mentioned that briefly in the study, and don't quote me on this number, but I think it was, so per 10,000 engineers, you also are going to see about $1 billion raised, right, to certify the aircraft. And I make the argument that you should actually raise $1.2 billion and put $20 million into a program such as a VOTEC program that specifically trains you to do these jobs. Because even if you do have, coming out of these programs with the FAA and stuff like that, they don't have programs to train. Right now, what exists is you could do VLRCO and get a PhD or something, and you're gonna have to do a graduate engineering degree, but we do need to develop some VOTEC programs that people could go to school for a couple years and have a really good career. Those have worked so well in our society and are really well received, especially for people that don't, especially want to do calculus, So I appreciate that question.
I was going to add on to that. What we're seeing in some other industries are, one, community colleges are starting to do more work around upskilling and reskilling. And then the other is, you see this quite a bit in the tech industry, is that they're really going around both the four-year universities and the community colleges and going directly to the high schools and creating 5- and 6-year high school programs to start them specifically in the skill sets that are needed, because they're saying that colleges and universities aren't producing them fast enough. So it's going to take some creativity, and it's going to take a joint effort between education, government, and the private community.
I just want to say we have a webpage, vtol.org/workforce, that has links to different resources, and I encourage you guys to check that out. And then also after the break, we have another discussion on training for pilots and engineers that I hope you guys all also attend. Was there a question back there?
I think the mic's on.
Dr. Khoshlahjeh, you made a comment earlier about companies not sharing information. And I'm leading a standards group with SA. And I find that to be very, very true. So I'd like any of you to maybe comment on how do we get over that? Because people are very secretive about their designs, and trying to come up with standards for them makes it very difficult sometimes, because you come up with an idea and you don't know why there's pushback, because people do not want to disclose why they're saying no or why they want something. So I'd like your comment on that.
Thank you so much for asking that question, because I have to stand corrected. I didn't mean that they're not, as far as I'm aware, I'm not saying that they're not share information. I referred to the report, actually. The report was saying that there's a problem, that, we have to report the information. And what I was trying to say is that as a very solution-oriented, we are engineers in a room, and we all, what do? We find this problem, and we are trying to find a solution for it. So this is a problem, and what do? The way we are, we have to find a solution. And how do we find the solution? We have to look at data. And if that data is not available for any reason that the study will reveal why, then, that will become a problem. But I do not have firsthand experience of, that information coming out or not, because I never worked HR. Yes.
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we did find that challenge when we were looking at companies. It's like, we can't go to a company, an eVTOL company, and say, okay, give me how many cisgender, how many, LGBTQ, how many, white. I mean, you can't ask those questions, are prohibited by law.
Okay.
So it's difficult to get some of that data, but there are ways, and I don't know if Danielle, you can explain, but there are ways that kind of information can be developed.
Well, and Matt touched on it earlier on the anonymous reporting study. Mm-hmm.
It's certainly the data is only as good as the data that's being collected. And if, let's say we have 100 employees and we only have 30 people that are responding, that data may not really truly be reflective of the company as a whole. So certainly we want to try to get as many people from EVE to internally respond to that, so we can just better understand those demographics, which is why it's being done as an anonymous survey. Because like Mike said, you can't just go out and ask somebody, these different types of questions. You need to make sure that that it's being done anonymously, or people are self-reporting those types of things.
Exactly. And so that's why we say, we recommend an industry-wide study, because you don't want all of the companies reporting different data, right? So you want to have a standard of the data. These are the questions that we want to ask, and have everybody answer them. But it has to be voluntary. And then we collect that data, and then we can sort of look at it together. And we've sort of done that in the past, but there was a lot missing. For example, and I mentioned, in the intro, intersectionality. I'm just curious, how many of you have heard of intersectionality before? Wow. So like 1 to 2% maybe. So what intersectionality is, I'm going to give you a very short, my version of the definition, but it basically is like how different demographics overlap. So where, I'm a white woman, Sharon's a black woman, you would look at, the opportunities that are available to you and what you traditionally grew up with or were around, and then how many times they intersect. And it turns out that African American transgender women have an average lifespan of 30 years. That's how critical intersectionality hits our society, 30 years old. So when we look at that and it actually affects the workforce, we look at how we're reaching people, how we're attracting people, and these things, they really do matter. It's not just to get votes. That's why I said in the beginning, how do we have these conversations without it turning political or argumentative? We just look at the data and the opportunities that people have and, make people feel welcome. So the study that needs to come out, it has to include intersectionality, because what we've done in the past, the industry has done in the past, is we look at men versus women, but it doesn't tell you the demographics of those women, or it looks at black versus white, but it doesn't tell you the demographics. What we need to break down those demographics further, and that's where we're going to find the answers to why people are leaving. That's where we're going to have those meaningful conversations. So we need to, create that study, implement it, and then I think we'll see a transformation that will benefit everybody, where, excuse me, nobody's the bad guy. We're human, we make mistakes. Nobody's to blame for this. It's just, we inherited this, challenge, but it's something that we'll all work together to solve and make the industry better and stronger. So anyway, more questions, but I just wanted to touch on that intersectionality thing.
Hi, I had a quick question just to brief on the industry and how their focus is right now with company loyalty for mid-level to senior level individuals and professionals, especially with kind of what's been going on in the tech industry as of late. I'm just kind of curious how the industry is looking at building that loyalty among the existing professionals that are there and trying to help keep retention high.
You guys want to comment? You guys are industry people.
Okay.
I didn't quite catch the question, so someone else go.
How to increase, I guess it was
Just
how to increase loyalty.
Yes, how to increase retention with company loyalty, amongst the people that you've already not looking at hiring new employees, right? Trying to build company loyalty. This is, think about the boomer generation. They were at companies for 20, 30 years, enjoying their, pensions or whichever, that gave them the job satisfaction. I'm thinking more about, people who are in the workforce now that, you're losing them, trying to figure out why you're losing them, but thinking about, job satisfaction and company loyalty and building, something more than just, this is the end product that we're going for, building a lifestyle that people enjoy at the company. Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
I think it all boils down to perceived value. And the study shows that perceived value is even more than how much you make, which I have to argue with that. But perceived value is all, essentially. So companies that want to, and then how that comes is that you have, we try with equity. When you don't have the D, you work on the I and the E, which I just learned and love today. And then if an employee feels that they're valued and they're contributing, then why would they, want to entertain the idea of going elsewhere?
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with just kind of the general workplace environment and what kind of management structure is kind of in place. I don't know how other companies operate. I have a weekly one-on-one with my boss, where for 30 minutes I can talk about anything that I want to. I'd never had that before in my career, and it is extremely valuable for me to be directly heard, to hear out the ideas, the strategies that I would have put in place for our company to take us to the next level, and to be able to kind of have those discussions. He provides opportunities for me to, have face time with the CEO and directly present some of his ideas as well. That's how you feel valued as an employee, right? By having that opportunity to be able to do that, by promoting that kind of workforce and that workplace environment where you have that high perceived value. I'm sure other companies probably do some of these very similar tactics, and maybe these are not novel. For me in this role, it's been really exciting to be able to have that. And I, kind of wish I could tell, my previous bosses, wow, if you'd done this, and I'm not saying that's what would have made me perhaps stay. I think this industry is just really fascinating, really cool, which is why I decided to, join it. But maybe there's some, lessons that can be learned from that, and that other, employers could put into place.
And one thing that I love that Archer does is that the leadership team sits together once in a while and discusses their employees and how to celebrate the contributions and identify that, what are the highest, what's been going on in the last, let's say month span. And then we have to make sure that we identify.
Your mic is cutting out. Use that one
Yes.
instead.
All right, could you guys do me a favor and speak up a little bit? I
We-
can't make the mics louder with this.
Can you say the last sentence, or I can start talking?
How much of it was cut out? All right, how much of it was cut out?
Just repeat the last.
All right, so I'm just saying that one practice that I love that Archer does is so the leadership team making sure that they get together and they discuss the contributions of everybody on the team and making sure that they celebrate them and appreciate the team essentially, which
And-
goes a long way.
And I'll give an example. A good friend of mine worked at Bell until a few weeks ago, and he decided that he was going to leave the vertical flight industry and go to work for another company because he had to be in the office, 5 days a week. And with so much flexibility now that a lot of companies discovered from the pandemic of remote work, he should have been really a top technical fellow or associate technical fellow at that company, but he decided to leave vertical flight because he didn't feel that that this kind of value, that they didn't value their employees enough to let them work remotely, and that's just one one case, but it's maybe representative.
What I hear everyone on the panel here saying is it's about your company culture that would want to others to stay, want employees to stay. But probably more important is around establishing a company culture so everyone feels like they're in it to win it. And so whether you use the example of a bricklayer, are they just laying bricks or are they building the church? Right? Do they have the same vision? CEO. Another example I use is when NASA went to put a man on the moon. Regardless of the role of the employees in that organization, everyone understood was that their role was critical to putting someone on the moon. And so if you were a maintenance person, which had nothing to probably do with the day-to-day engineering and the calculations and putting together the suits, that's important for someone to understand that I need to move my widgets so that everyone else up here can move their widgets. And you feel like you're part of the team.
Everywhere I go, I watch young people either engage in social media or playing games. So if we can't fight them, can we join them? Can we leverage the social media or gaming industry and get our message, get some interesting thing, get them hooked, and they have no choice afterwards, join our society.
That's great. That's, something that we're really passionate about, HYSKY Society, that we talk about every single day. We need to be reaching Gen Z. We need to be on social media. We need to be on TikTok. We need to be doing all the things. We work in a virtual event center, which is a video game. You have an avatar, everything. So, embracing these new technologies, but also, and a hard part of that is like getting the knowledge transfer from the older folks, but then also incorporating the new technology. And that's a challenge. If you figure that one out, let me know. But we are embracing the new technology. And so, yeah, I do love that. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on.
Well, we started with Danielle. First of all, I want to say, Danielle, she mentioned the Agility Prime launch in April of 2020, and that was, I started talking about hydrogen, and she's texting me while I'm speaking, But anyway, we started the hydrogen with her, under her leadership, started the Hydrogen eVTOL Council, which now is HYSKY. But we also started a diversity initiative. We have the Diversiflight Scholars. We have got a Diversiflight and Workforce Twitter account. So, we've got scholarships, design competitions. So we have a lot of stuff, outreach for young people to encourage them to find out about VFS. But it's still kind of it's not TikTok, it's Twitter. So it's still kind of the institutional types of outreach. So we need to definitely get beyond that into finding the Zoomers, the Gen Z, and the stuff that resonates with them.
The good news is that the rising tides lift all ships. So whoever, we are, as an industry, we have to try to spark the interest in what we do.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying that if a kid can do one of like our eVTOL simulators, that they should certainly be flying an eVTOL, but perhaps maybe getting more kids into those things, right? Tapping into the gaming kids, right? They already love that stuff anyways. We're going to be training some of these eVTOL operators on our simulators. That's how they're going to be learning, right? And so maybe that's a way that we can sit there and say, hey, if you've got a real vested interest in this video game, maybe you should take a look at our simulator. Maybe that's something that could be interesting to you, and we can find those future aviators. I mean, I think that we just need to, like everyone has said, go where they are at. Start talking to them younger and sooner to get them interested and excited. Tap into some of these, museums of science and discovery. A lot of times they have an aviation wing. I specifically spoke to the one in Fort Lauderdale, who said, we're about to revamp our entire aviation space. We would love to have, an eVTOL simulator that could replace the rover landing on Mars. That's something that kids would really, really think is cool about being able to fly an eVTOL here in the Fort Lauderdale Museum of Science and Discovery. So those are ways that, we can kind of go where they're at, but still on that kind of STEM pathway. So it's still very educational and very exciting for them.
It was funny, Johnny, I was almost have the exact same question. So first I was going to say, as an engineer who stumbled into aerospace 35 years ago, not because anybody told me about it, but one of the things I was going to share was I did a career day at a junior high. It was like a year and a half ago. It was right at the end of the pandemic. And it was just talking about composite materials and different things about aerospace and rockets. But my last side, it wasn't one of your eVTOLs, but it was an eVTOL. And every single kid in 5 sessions that rotated through came alive. And I got, when can I buy one? How much are they? What is that? That's so to Johnny's point, I think if we're looking at, it takes 5 years to grow these people, like let's start now by growing the interest at those young ages, whether it's, like the YouTube, the video, whatever it is, because I think the passion you can spark then and the way they're so quick to respond and the way this industry is quick moving, that's going to attract them as well. And I think if we can take those strong points and market it, it will be a good habit for all of us.
You said the key word, which I've been saying this, is that, aviation has a marketing problem. We did really well with the Challenger, and that didn't work out very well for us. But we have another opportunity, and, we did really well with the moon landing. But we are developing the coolest technology in the world, and nobody knows about it. We have a serious marketing problem. Talk about an opportunity for any marketing people. And another thing that I love about this industry is that so many of us come from other industries. Dre is not from aviation either. In fact, most of our team isn't from aviation. So Matt, we would have never known unless you told us. Yeah, you fit right in. We bring everybody together and we like to welcome everybody. But, anybody can join this. You don't have to be an engineer or an aerospace engineer because there's so many skills needed, especially marketing.
It's also the way that the eVTOLs are talking about being OEMs and operators, then we have the whole ecosystem. So we need from infrastructure to pilots to vehicle to mechanical cybersecurity. So we need an array of talent to be joining the
Exactly.
team. So
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
2 minutes.
Okay. I may propose. My experience in fixed wing aircraft, when there is a complex, there always advisory circular accompanied by what they call general material or guidance material. So I propose, because electrical propulsion system is complex, right? Why not we propose to have advisory circular from FAA, and then the standard for the electrical motor and inverter. Inverter is motor controller. So it should come from producer, from supplier of electric motor like MRAX, Manix, also inverter. So let's invite them and make generic like minimum operational performance standard like for battery, TO311, right? So it makes life easier for everybody who develop electric vertical takeoff and landing, right? Because if you have advisory circular, if you have a guidance material, it's like plug and play. That's it. Not like right now, I want to buy electric motor. I ask to supplier, have you done this? Have you done? They don't know. They don't know the answer. Even they don't know the answer because they don't have standard. Why not the Vertical Flight Society? It might propose something, and if I'm under umbrella of FAA, maybe everybody will like to join. This is my proposal. That's number one. Second, so I believe lightning zoning for eVTOL not yet exists. If you look on the SAE ARP, it's only for fixed wing and helicopter. Well, eVTOL is quite different. It's the same thing. You can invite student, analyze and then propose something, and then propose to SAE-ARP to update. The same thing with her, with radiation field. If you vertiport surrounding high building, there's many antennas, you might have radiation, and the field strength, it could be double because there are reflection. And nobody measured. Right? SARP already measured in 1998. It's been a long time ago. It's not yet updated. Why not propose update and then you just give this to Joby, to whatever the company. It says follow this one. This environment will be. Okay. This is my proposal. Okay. That's all.
Okay.
Will be nice.
Well, thank you very much for that. We're actually out of time, and I wanted to ask everybody that's here, this is a tradition to take a photo. So if everybody can come to the front of the room, we'll take a photo. Danielle, would you like to say any closing remarks?
Thank you all for coming. I'm actually really excited because this is our second time doing this panel, and I think we've got like quadruple the people that we had last year. So it's really fun to watch these photos grow over the years. And thank you all for participating and listening and engaging in the conversation. Thank you also to our panelists.
Okay, so everybody please come to the front of the room.